As the 1127th day of the Russo-Ukrainian War unfolds, the geopolitical chess game intensifies, particularly with Russia's recent push for the United States to lift sanctions as a precondition for a ceasefire with Ukraine. Negotiations surrounding this ceasefire are complicated by the broader web of international relations and the ongoing military developments in the region. On March 26, the European Union reiterated its commitment to maintaining sanctions against Russia despite Moscow's demands for relief. Anita Hipper, spokesperson for the European Commission's Foreign Affairs, emphasized that the EU would consider lifting sanctions only if Russia ended its aggression and withdrew its forces from Ukraine. This stance reflects a firm resolve among European leaders to hold Russia accountable for its actions, which they view as violations of international law. The backdrop of these negotiations is marked by continued hostilities on the ground. Russian forces have made recent advances in the Kursk Oblast and intensified attacks in the Sumy region, putting pressure on Ukrainian defensive lines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has warned that these actions indicate a potential spring offensive by Russia, further complicating efforts toward peace. In fact, General Oleksandr Syrsky, head of Ukraine's armed forces, has reported that Ukrainian troops are engaged in both defensive and offensive operations to counteract Russian advancements. Despite the grim realities of ongoing military operations, there is a cautious sense of optimism regarding the ceasefire talks. U.S. President Donald Trump, in a recent conversation with Zelenskyy, indicated a willingness to engage in negotiations that could lead to a cessation of hostilities. However, the specifics of any potential agreement remain murky, especially concerning the conditions under which the U.S. might consider lifting sanctions. The situation is further complicated by the dynamics of military strategy. Both Russia and Ukraine have exchanged accusations of ceasefire violations, with Ukraine denying claims from the Russian Ministry of Defense that it has targeted energy infrastructure in occupied territories. These allegations underscore the fragile nature of any ceasefire agreement, as both sides appear to be preparing for continued conflict while publicly advocating for peace. Meanwhile, the Coalition of the Willing, comprising leaders from various nations, convened in Paris to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized the need for a unified European response to the crisis, highlighting the strategic importance of military assistance and cooperation among allied nations. Notably, the absence of U.S. representation at this meeting has raised questions about America's role in the future of European security and its commitment to supporting Ukraine. As the war grinds on, the implications of these developments are profound. The ongoing military conflict not only reshapes regional politics but also influences global economic conditions, particularly in energy markets. The potential for a ceasefire and subsequent lifting of sanctions could alter the landscape significantly, yet the path forward remains fraught with challenges. Looking ahead, the international community watches closely as diplomatic efforts unfold amidst continued military engagement. The coming weeks will be critical in determining whether the recent discussions can yield substantive progress towards peace or whether the conflict will escalate, further complicating an already volatile situation. With various stakeholders involved, the stakes are high, and the repercussions of any decisions made will resonate far beyond the immediate theater of war. In the early hours of March 27, 2025, Russia launched a substantial aerial assault on Ukraine, employing a total of 86 drones and an Iskander-M ballistic missile. The attack, which originated from Russian territory and occupied Crimea, was met with a robust response from Ukrainian air defenses, which successfully intercepted 42 loitering munitions. Another 26 drones were unaccounted for, likely due to electronic countermeasures that rendered them ineffective. This latest offensive underscores the ongoing volatility in the region and the persistent threat posed by Russian military capabilities. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that the drones were deployed from various locations, including Milarovo-Korsk and Primorsko-Akhtarsk in Russia, as well as from Chauta in Crimea. In a statement, they confirmed the effectiveness of their defense systems, which utilized a combination of aircraft, electronic warfare assets, and mobile fire groups. The assault had a considerable impact affecting several regions including Kharkiv, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk and Chernihiv, with reports indicating damage to civilian infrastructure and injuries among the populace. This drone strike comes amidst a backdrop of renewed diplomatic activity aimed at establishing a ceasefire. On March 24 and 25, U.S., Ukrainian and Russian officials engaged in discussions surrounding a potential ceasefire concerning strikes on energy infrastructure and maritime operations in the Black Sea. However, the specifics of these agreements remain ambiguous, with both sides exchanging accusations of violations. The Ukrainian General Staff has refuted claims made by the Russian Ministry of Defense regarding alleged Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy facilities, indicating a continued cycle of retaliatory rhetoric. Amidst these developments, a notable summit was convened in Paris where over 30 nations including key European leaders gathered to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron, who hosted the summit, emphasized that European troops would respond decisively if there were further aggression from Russia. He stated that the coalition's goal is to reinforce Ukraine's defenses while simultaneously developing a long-term strategy for peace. In parallel, there are concerns regarding the implications of external support for Russia's military efforts. Reports have surfaced indicating that North Korea has sent additional troops and military supplies to aid Russia's war efforts, which could further complicate the military dynamics in the region. This support raises alarms about the potential for an escalation in hostilities, especially as both sides prepare for possible spring offensives. The geopolitical landscape remains precarious, with leaders like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy urging unity among Western powers to maintain pressure on Moscow. He has consistently warned that any weakening of sanctions or concessions to Russia could embolden further aggression. Conversely, Russian officials have rejected the notion of U.S. involvement in overseeing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, asserting that such proposals are unacceptable and reiterating their commitment to military operations in Ukraine. As the situation continues to evolve, the focus shifts to how these military actions and diplomatic negotiations will shape the future of the conflict. The ongoing exchanges, both militarily and politically, signal that while there may be attempts at ceasefire, the underlying tensions and hostilities are far from resolved. The next steps taken by both sides, particularly in light of international discussions and potential new military alliances, will likely dictate the course of events in the coming weeks. In a significant development in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, President Donald Trump recently facilitated a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, a crucial area for shipping and trade. This agreement, reached during separate U.S.-led negotiations with both countries, marks a pivotal moment as it aims to halt hostilities that have had dire implications for global food security and regional stability. However, skepticism looms over the durability of this ceasefire, especially given past failures to maintain similar agreements. The ceasefire, announced on March 25, 2025, allows commercial vessels from both Russia and Ukraine to navigate the Black Sea without the threat of military action. This initiative comes after intense discussions held in Saudi Arabia, where U.S. negotiators brokered separate meetings with Russian and Ukrainian representatives. The deal has been framed as a significant diplomatic achievement, but observers are wary, recalling a previous ceasefire that unraveled after just 1 year. In exchange for Russia's commitment to refrain from attacking Ukrainian energy infrastructure, a promise originally made by President Vladimir Putin to Trump, the U.S. has agreed to assist Russia in gaining better access to agricultural and fertilizer exports. This involves reinstating Russia's access to the SWIFT financial messaging system and lifting sanctions on a Russian bank, moves that have raised eyebrows among critics who argue they may embolden Moscow. Trump's approach appears to be extracting concessions from both sides, yet it raises concerns about the implications for Ukraine's sovereignty, noted Rajan Menon, a professor emeritus of international relations at the City College of New York. He expressed skepticism about the impact of the ceasefire, suggesting it might disproportionately favor Russia, given the country's significant energy production capabilities compared to Ukraine's vulnerabilities. The Black Sea with its vital shipping lanes has been a focal point since the onset of Russia's invasion on February 24, 2022. The conflict has severely disrupted Ukrainian grain exports crucial for global food supplies, particularly in regions heavily reliant on Ukrainian grain. The blockade imposed by Russia has raised fears of escalating food shortages and soaring prices, particularly in countries across Africa that depend on these imports. In a related context, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy made headlines with his bold assertion that Putin will die soon amidst speculation about the Russian leader's health. Zelenskyy's remarks, made during a recent visit to Paris, reflect a broader concern about the stability of Putin's regime and the potential for a shift in the war dynamics. It is very important that America does not help Putin to get out of this global isolation now, Zelenskyy emphasized, urging continued pressure on Russia from Western nations. As European leaders convene in Paris, discussions are intensifying around military support for Ukraine and the potential deployment of European troops in response to any renewed aggression from Russia. French President Emmanuel Macron, during a trilateral meeting with Zelenskyy and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, reaffirmed the need for a united front against Russian hostilities. He highlighted that European forces would be prepared to respond should Russia escalate its attacks. The geopolitical landscape remains complex, with North Korea reportedly sending additional troops and military supplies to support Russia's efforts. This development underscores the extent of international involvement in the conflict, complicating the prospect of a sustained peace agreement. In conclusion, while the recent ceasefire agreement in the Black Sea offers a glimmer of hope for de-escalation, its long-term viability remains uncertain. The intertwined interests of global powers, along with ongoing military assistance to Ukraine and Russia's unpredictable maneuvers, suggest that the path to lasting peace will be fraught with challenges. As diplomatic efforts continue, the world watches closely, aware that the consequences of this conflict extend far beyond the immediate region and could reshape international relations for years to come. In a stark acknowledgement of the ongoing information warfare surrounding the Ukraine crisis, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy recently expressed concerns about the pervasive influence of Russian disinformation in the United States. Speaking to European journalists after a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, Zelenskyy stated, "I can't be ungrateful to the US, but today, unfortunately, they are under the influence of Russian narratives." This statement underscores the complex interplay of diplomacy, public perception, and media influence at a critical juncture in the conflict. Zelenskyy's comments came as he prepared for a significant summit known as the Coalition of the Willing, where representatives from around 30 nations are expected to discuss military support for Ukraine. This meeting follows Macron's announcement of a €2 billion military aid package aimed at bolstering Ukraine's defenses against ongoing Russian aggression. The package includes missiles, armored vehicles, and drone technology, reinforcing the commitment of European nations to support Ukraine amid a backdrop of escalating hostilities. The summit, which is set to solidify strategies for future military cooperation, highlights a growing urgency among European leaders to establish a robust defense framework. Macron emphasized the need for a European armed force that could be deployed in Ukraine as a deterrent against further Russian attacks. If there was again a generalized aggression against Ukrainian soil, these armies would in fact be under attack, Macron stated, framing the proposed force not as an offensive measure but as a necessary precaution for peace. The discussions are taking place against the backdrop of intensified Russian drone attacks across Ukraine, which have caused significant civilian casualties and destruction. Zelenskyy condemned these assaults, stating, "Every day in Ukraine is marked by large-scale attacks with strike drones. No country should have to go through this." He reiterated that any discussions about easing sanctions or diplomatic concessions in light of ongoing aggression are both inappropriate and unhelpful. While the coalition aims to present a united front against Russian aggression, the absence of the United States from these discussions raises questions about the future of transatlantic coordination on security issues. The Trump administration has shown reluctance to engage in discussions about deploying European troops in Ukraine, with officials dismissing the coalition's efforts as mere posturing. This divergence in approach could complicate the cohesiveness of Western support for Ukraine. As both Zelenskyy and Macron prepare for the summit, the stakes are high. The proposed European force would not only serve as a deterrent but also play a critical role in training Ukrainian troops, as more than 75,000 soldiers have already received military instruction from allies. The strategic goal is to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities, ensuring that its military remains the front line against any potential resurgence of Russian aggression. Looking ahead, the outcome of the summit could redefine the dynamics of European security and the role of international forces in Ukraine. As Zelenskyy and Macron aim to forge a path toward a sustainable peace, the international community must grapple with the complexities of military support, the influence of disinformation, and the geopolitical ramifications of Russia's actions. The ongoing conflict continues to challenge notions of security and solidarity among Western allies, setting the stage for further developments in the months to come.